everybody. I'm here with my friend Bob Paulin. Yeah, I interviewed Bob back in 2010. I think it was.
Yeah.
It was after a couple years after I got back from out west interviewing people.
In St. Catharines.
In St. Catharines. Yeah. Studio 123, I think, was the name of your shop back then. So I just wanted to catch a video today with Bob and have him share a little bit about his personal history and some of the things he's been up to the last so many years and what he's currently up to. So thanks for doing this video with me.
Thank you, Ned. Always great talking to you. Always.
Likewise. Yeah. And today, Bob and I have been, I've been geeking out
we both
pretty steadily.
Yeah.
He showed me a lot of the stuff in his archive, but we'll get into that in a few minutes.
Right.
But it's such an honor to come and see all that history that you've collected.
Hey, it's awesome to show it off to somebody who actually will appreciate a little bit of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
It's not everybody's cup of tea, you know, and it's interesting to be able to show it off to someone that understands the industry and knows its history.
Yeah. I appreciated looking at all this stuff, and I photographed a ton of stuff. So, and we're going to get together again, and I'm going to get some more photos. So I'll show up in the books that we're working on. Okay. So you got into this industry basically by offending Dave Price.
A little bit,
little Dave.
Dave was had a motorcycle at the time and was getting some work, wanted to get some work done on it. And I was repairing bikes at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I was drawing tattoo designs for people, and some of them were going to Hamilton to get him to tattoo them. And he said, you draw just like we tattoo. Like, you should be doing this. And I said, that's not art. I said, I thought tattoos at the time were like coloring book designs.
Cartoons.
Yeah, and cartoons, right? And he got so mad, and then he showed up with a shopping bag full of tattoo magazines. Some of the very first tattoo magazines to ever come out. Easy Rider was putting them out quarterly, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And you think this isn't art? And he threw them on my porch, and then I opened it up, and I seen Brian Everett and Jack Rudy, and I'm like, oh my God, like, this is not what I was used to. My dad, my brother had a tattoo,
mm-hmm.
and they were cartoons. And I actually seen tattoos done in a drawing style.
Yeah.
And I was hooked immediately. That's all I could think about. It's all I wanted to do. And Dave got me started. And threw a little misinformation at me to trip me up to see if I was smart enough to problem solve.
Okay.
Because I think early in the tattoo industry, in my period in the tattoo industry, you had to be a jack of all trades. You had to be able to do electrical work. You had to be able to silver solder. You had to be able to troubleshoot all the things involved in the process. You know
That's right.
And so if you weren't good at that, anything could trip you up and screw up your ability to do a tattoo successfully. Even not cleaning the flux out, soldering the needles too tight. You know, there's so many things you could do that could ruin it. And
well, we were craftsmen.
Yeah.
And that's something that has come up in a lot of these interviews that I've done. Yeah. Our weakest point would be, you know, where we'd expose our ability to do our job, whether it be mixing ink or making needles or
mixing ink.
You know, I didn't mix ink personally.
I did.
Did you mix ink? Yeah.
You know what? I bought, I think, 10 pounds of pigment from Stainless Studios when they first opened.
Mm.
It was all Mickey Sharp's pigment, dry pigment.
Yeah.
And, oh man, I ruined a kitchen and ruined a mixer and probably my lungs.
Yeah.
You know?
Psycho Dave told me a great story about him and Ace Daniels mixing ink.
Yeah.
So Ace takes him into the garage,
right.
loads up the
garage.
loads up the blender with a whole bunch of blue ink.
Yeah.
And then it didn't have the lid on it.
Oh no.
So Ace tells Dave, he says, I'm going to step out for a minute, just mix all this up.
Yeah.
Dave turns the blender on and just covered himself.
You know what? The worst part, too, is there was only one blue. It was navy, dark navy.
Yeah.
I'd add white to it to make it, and but blue and yellow were nightmares because if they got on anything, they never came out.
Yeah.
And every other color you could wash out of something. But even if you had a blender or a hand mixer or anything, they were permanently stained, permanently from blue or yellow. So you had to have a mixer for every color too. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And then if you overmixed it or didn't, and then at the time too, Gary from
Studio One
Tattoo Supply in Toronto, his brand of ink was mixed with Listerine, and you could smell it. And when you got tattooed by it, you could taste it.
Yeah.
Especially if you got tattoo heavy-handed, it would get right into your bloodstream. And I'm like, I remember getting tattooed by it, and I'm like, I can taste Listerine. And then we went and checked, and sure enough, that was a common homogenizing agent and astringent for mixing dry pigment, right?
That's right.
And but then a couple of years later, it stopped.
Yeah.
Once people sort of got hip to it, and then it was glycerine and witch hazel, and the ratios were a secret. So you had to know somebody that could give you the right ratios, right? Or it would clump up like Play-Doh and get hard.
Yeah.
And
I remember having lots of pigment. They would just go rock hard in the bottles.
At the time too, I remember you couldn't mix different brands. Sometimes if you tried to mix two different colors from two different companies, they'd harden.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just wild.
So Chris Reynolds played a little bit of a role in your start too.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris worked on St. Paul Street right around the corner from me. And when I was first, Chris got some help. Him and Dave Price both got their start together, I think at
Adventure,
and with
Donnie D. Bryant.
Yeah. D and Don Day.
Yeah.
From Midway. And then Accents of Skin.
Oh, that would be Toby Martin.
Right? So he acquired some things there and then came to St. Catharines, and I immediately fell in love with his work. He was doing really incredible black and gray realism, mind-blowing stuff, super fast. I watched him do a pinhead on a guy's stomach in 4 hours, from his collar to his belly button.
Yeah.
In 4 hours. And my mind was blown. And so he helped me learn how to make realistic stencils and how to do portraits and realism,
Yeah.
And he had an unusual style and an unusual lifestyle, and was a bit of a wild man, but everybody was on some level back then.
Sure, yeah.
And but Chris was a very talented artist. He could draw anything,
Well, I've talked about this before. Like, one of the things that we don't see today is the egregious characters that showed up in our industry, and just things that they would do that just shock people.
Yeah, yeah.
They're just being themselves. Yeah. But
I always call them pirates, because it was sailors, pirates, bikers. It was all people that lived outside the normal style of behavior, and they attracted people. They were unusual characters. It was easy to be distracted when you were getting tattooed while you listened to stories from these characters.
Yeah.
And I think it helped, even if the tattoo didn't turn out great, it was like, oh, let me tell you about the guy that did it.
Yeah.
Right. Especially people like Ace, Crazy Ace.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he could, you were an hour talking to him before then he was like, what do you want? I'm like, after an hour of talking.
That's right.
And it was exciting talking to him, and talking almost everybody that was a well-known name in the industry in the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. They were almost all amazing characters. you know. And the ones that aren't always remembered, you know.
That's right.
You had to be a little bit of a character, and all sorts of things were acceptable at the time that aren't acceptable now.
Yeah,
you know, and they might not have been acceptable to everybody, but everybody that would come into a tattoo shop felt that it was acceptable. You know, that smoking cigarettes and loud music.
Oh, I used to smoke in my shop all the time.
Yeah.
I'd be smoking away, and if the client didn't like it, that was too bad.
Yeah.
I was a smoker, so that's what was happening.
It was more common for people to smoke then too. So having someone sit down for 3 hours and go through pain without letting them have a cigarette was a tough sale, you know?
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'd get up and walk outside, get overheated and pass out on the sidewalk from the heat.
Yeah.
So you're like, no, you can't go for a smoke. I'm like, I need a smoke. You're like, all right, but I'm going to go out with you. And you'd have to stand with them, make sure they're okay, you know, because even just the process of getting up in the middle of a tattoo sometimes makes you a little lightheaded. Then open the front door, go outside, hit that 80 degrees and just drop.
Yeah.
You know, and that's bad for business, having people faint in front of the store, right?
Yeah, you think?
Yeah.
So when I first did our interview back in 2010, it was so nostalgic for me because I remember in the early 90s seeing some of your tattoo flash that you put out. And you've got a really interesting story in what you did with your tattoo flash. And like myself, like you've traveled.
Yeah.
You've traveled to all the different tattoo shops. And tell us a little bit about when you were selling your flash.
Well, before I started tattooing, when I first got interested and was learning, the first thing I did was made a set. Dave was like, you need to make a set of your flash. You got to prove to people you can draw, you know, and draw tattoo designs. So I made a set, then I made another set, and then I started on a third. And then I was like, all right, this is, I need to see if they sell. So me and Tanya at the time went on road trips. We'd go for a couple of days or a week or a day and just drive everywhere we could. There was a tattoo shop in every town. So we'd just hit that shop and walk in. And a lot of shops would buy just because they knew you were fundraising. So I remember being in Virginia, and Emmy, who used to work at Wakefield in the Falls, walked in and she's like, Bob. And I'm like, Emmy. And she's like, I'm like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm selling flash. And she's like, give me a set. I'm like, do you want to see it? She's like, no. I'm like, what do you mean no? She's like, you're on a road trip. There, just give it to me. What do you want? I'm like, $100, you know? Yeah. And we made a decent living selling flash shop to shop to shop. And we'd go to the States. Printing was cheap. I'd bring the masters with me, master copies, and we'd hit a Kinko's, make a set for 35 cents, go to a shop, sell it for $100.
Yeah.
And then on and on and on. And sometimes I'd make $500, $700, $1,000 a day just traveling. And it would pay for our trips. We'd leave with $400 and come home with $4,000.
Yeah.
And for nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is the best industry in the world. I haven't even started tattooing yet.
And this is before you even started tattooing, yeah.
And then we'd travel. We'd go on vacation and go to Florida, walk into a shop, there's my stuff on the wall.
Yeah.
You know? And they go, who are you? And I'm like, I'm him.
Yeah, that's me over there on the wall.
And it opened a lot of doors for me too.
Well, that was how I became aware of you in the early 90s, is through your flash work. And I remember seeing it going, wow, this guy... You and Al Hartshorn,
Al.
when I looked at both of your flash, I just thought these guys are like the best artists in the world or something.
Al is a truly great artist though. And I love doing Al's flash. I've got to give some respect there because I got a couple of Al's demon heads in Tattoo Magazine. And I remember Al saying, you're the only one I've seen do my stuff right. And I'm like, I just did it note for note. I just did it the way it was drawn. I didn't try and make it my own. And I'm grateful because a couple magazines published my work because of his flash, You know
That's
what I mean?
right.
I'm not above doing someone else's work, flash. I paid for that flash.
That's right.
I paid for the right to use it. And I, that was part of the deal back in the day. You bought people's flash, you did it, you made money with it, you know, and, it's not so much, it's not a part of the industry like it was, you know, the internet, suddenly art's free. You could just take other people's art and there was no market for it, you know, but to collect vintage flash is pretty cool.
It is.
Yeah. Because you're actually getting something, especially something used that may have made thousands of dollars, that might have been on so many people. You know? And it's a great touchstone and a great thing to collect.
So this leads me into the next thing I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah, you have a website or a Instagram page,
Vintage Tattoo Canada.
Vintage Tattoo Canada, and what got you interested in tattoo history?
My collection. When I first started tattooing, I started collecting right away. There was no internet. So the only way to learn about the industry was to take any kind of ephemera, any kind of paper thing that you could get. And I cherished all of it, you know?
Yeah.
I remember I sent out for the first Mickey Sharp's catalog, and it came with a postcard of Mike Austin's. And that's when I first seen Mike Austin's work. And I was hooked right away, you know, and I collected everything, every little piece of tattoo related paper had something somebody drew on it. And that was my way of getting to know who was who. And I would go to conventions, and every single table I would grab a card. And I wish I'd kept all of them. I traded a lot of them to a collector in Australia, collectors from all over the world. We used to trade business cards, and I kind of wish I hadn't, because I've given so many good cards away. You know? It's worse than hockey cards because they're rarer than hockey cards, you know?
Yeah.
And like I said, I regret giving all the Mike Malone cards that I gave away, you know, and now they're worth so much. I never ever thought business cards would be worth anything, but they are now.
Yeah.
And
well, you said the one card was $800.
That Mike Malone card. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I had 5 of them.
Yeah.
I think Zip got one. I think Flea from Australia got at least one. You know what I mean? And now I'm still buying them. Like I just bought the Sailor Jerry card from his New Brunswick store I paid $100 for it. I wanted it so bad, you know?
Yeah.
But, and it was easier to get Canadian cards because they're close.
That's right.
I could travel to conventions, and I was traveling to shops to sell flash, and I would grab a stack of cards. Are you okay with me taking? Yeah, take as many as you want. So I would, you know.
Yeah.
And but it's built my collection into what it is, and you can see the evolution of the card as well. You know, we went from very simple cards to really complex photo cards, and I don't know why. I enjoy collecting it. You know, it's my way of getting a little piece of that artist too, right? I actually have something from their store.
That's right.
So unlike any other thing, this is something that artist designed to represent them, and now I have an original. You know, and it makes me feel part of that community to have part of it.
Yeah,
you know, and it's not. At one time, that was the only way to get to know everybody. Without the magazines were too, and I have a vast magazine collection. It's insane.
And you've been in the magazine how many times? 100 and some odd times?
I think 111 times I've been in tattoo. Tattoos for men, tattoos for women, Savage, Tattoo, Skin and Ink,
And see, for our generation, that's a big deal. Like
International Tattoo Art was the first magazine I was actually in from the '93 Montreal convention. I took a group up. We took an airport van and brought 11 people up, and that was the first time I'd seen Mike Austin work. I spent the day watching him and Tintin work all day. All the people I was with were like, "Aren't you going to come see the show?" And I'm like, "I'm just going to watch Tintin work." 4 hours. I watched him work for 4 hours. I watched Mike work for hours. And it was a good way to learn too.
That's right.
You know?
Now, when you look at your collection of history and memorabilia you've collected over the years, what would be your top favorite pieces?
I really like, I really fanned out about Jack Rudy and Brian Everett.
Okay.
So I really made a big deal of collecting their stuff at the beginning, the early Am Jams. It was just, Jack used to give out coasters, stickers, posters, you know what I mean? And that marketing really helped him. He was also in all of the first tattoo magazines. If anybody, he was a master at exploiting the media.
That's right.
And
well, in one of your
and Canadian Mike.
That's right.
You know, Mike Austin was to me, was up there with those guys. Canada had its stars as well, and some were very underrated because we're Canadian. You know, Canada didn't get the same media exposure as the United States did. You know, the magazines really, really focused on American tattooing and not so much on Canadian. It's a shame.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that's part of why I wanted to write the Canadian tattoo history and capture all this information, is because it really hasn't been ever captured. You know, maybe people have done snippets, and Jamie's book, Needlework, it covers a bit of ground, but not only a sliver of the Canadian tattoo scene. And so that's what my endeavor is, to really get a screenshot of the Canadian electric tattoo scene, which is overwhelming. I just broke 100,000 words in the book project the other day, and I was telling Kurt that when I interviewed him. But yeah, it's been such a wild ride, and getting to meet all my favorite tattooers, and
let the world know too that it isn't just Paul Jeffries, and it isn't just Jerry, and you know the guys that got more exposure early.
That's right.
And some magazines did some Skin and Ink got into a Canadian tour a little bit, you know, and but it was limited, and you had to read that magazine to know it, you know.
That's right. So you're still working today, actively tattooing. How has your style or your methods moved with the times?
I love working. I do. A lot of people are in this industry and in this business for the money, but I really like to work on people. I like to spend my day with people, tattooing them. So I really try my best to stay current and to have my work stand up to new artist level, you know. And it keeps me booked for months. And people enjoy my style and my company, so it works out well. You know, I've got customer loyalty. I'm tattooing the grandchildren of some of my customers.
I know.
You know?
I'm in the same situation.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
And we're like the new old timers.
Right. We are the new old timers. Right.
Yeah.
I know.
Which seems funny to say.
I know
really.
It does. Yeah. But that here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just something we have to get used to. Although I don't feel it, you know, although sometimes I look in the mirror, I see it, and that reality's catching up. But one of the things I learned from old school artists is you can work as long as you can hold a machine up.
That's right.
You know, when you think about, there was tattooists that worked out of wheelchairs.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as I enjoy it.
Curly Allen would use his face to stretch skin.
It's crazy.
He'd have you stretch your own skin because half his body was limp.
I've heard so many crazy stories. Guys would close a drawer against the arm and kneel against the drawer to keep the skin tight. You know? And I'm like, you stick your customer's arm in a drawer, like anything to keep skin tight.
Yeah.
You know? And but they were using tights back then that were so hard to push through the skin that you really needed to keep that skin super tight.
That's right. And, the needles were pretty blunt.
Yeah.
Back then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why they could do a tattoo in 15 minutes too, because it was pushing ink so fast. You know, that a blunt needle that had been used for a week.
That's right.
You know, it's just, it was blunt to begin with.
So, you know, as you came into the industry with a drawing ability back when there wasn't as many artists in the industry.
Right.
So you came into, you're making an influence, you were working away at your craft. The old school guys
didn't like it. And they did not like it. I remember the early guys telling me and telling my customers, your work's going to fall off. It's going to fall out. Those lines are too fine. They're just going to be gone in a few years. You know what I mean? You're wasting your money. And it wasn't true. Mm-hmm. But they were protecting their time, you know?
That's right.
To have somebody come in and prove them not wrong, but prove that it could be done. Mm-hmm. It just couldn't be done with the tools they were using at the time. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that was that transition. Machine builders, needle makers, Icon device or Icon device, changed a lot of that. You know, we started getting really good needles and really good product. It was a lot easier to make a great tattoo, you know, and using single use needles. It's like using a brand new pair of scissors every time. Of course, it's going to work great.
That's right.
But when I was buying needles at studio, they were $4.50 a needle. Mm-hmm. So you're doing a $30 tattoo that cuts in. You know what I mean?
Oh,
and then you got paper towels and all the other stuff that go with it, and your overhead. And so,
like 11 or 12% of the profit just in the needle.
Right, just in one needle.
That's right.
And then what if it was I want a line finer than that, and then guys at the time too were using the same needle to line and to color. So you could tell who was doing it because sometimes their color had a little bit of black in it until the black ran out. You know?
That's right.
Oh, muddy reds. And
I remember when I went and interviewed Keith Stewart in Montreal, he was coloring in with a liner.
First customer.
Yeah. Customer number one in Icon. Right. Yeah. But Keith was coloring the guy with a liner needle, like big tattoo.
Yeah.
That just blew my mind. But man, could he throw color in with that little tiny needle?
Never mind. The first at Montreal, I won Best Haida in '94 for a Haida back piece on my piercer, Jeremy, this big.
Yeah.
Took 45 hours. I did with a 5.
Okay.
Round.
With a 5 round.
It took 45 hours. Just.
Yeah.
And then I won. I won first place.
That's right.
With a 5. I didn't tell anybody either for years. Everybody's like, how'd you do that?
Well, the cat's out of the bag now.
Yeah. And then I did it for a camera. I traded him a camera, a 35 millimeter camera for it. And that's when I started getting my stuff in the magazines because the photos were turning out well.
Yeah.
You know, for the first time.
Sure. Yeah. So what do you hope to leave the industry? And this, Kurt said this is kind of a weird question because I'm still working.
Yeah.
But what do you hope to, because our time of influence is slowly winding down.
Sure.
And what do you hope to leave the industry with your career?
That's a tough one. I don't know. I think knowing where you came from and whose shoulders you stood on should make you share some of the responsibility of it. I think that a lot of new tattooers and tattoo artists should understand that the industry wasn't always socially conscious.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always reputable, and we're not gatekeepers. We just don't want to feel bad about the things that we did that got you here. You know, like when I meet young tattooers who think that we're gatekeepers and we're trying to keep the industry away from them, we're not. Mm-hmm. We just don't want to feel bad about the industry we broke through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I wasn't a biker. I didn't sell drugs. I didn't do any of the things that were done prior to my generation, you know, and we tried our best to make the industry legitimate as we could. Mm-hmm. And anything we felt was wrong, we changed. Most of my shops had at least half or 3/4 were women working in them. It wasn't a male exclusive shop ever. And women belong in the industry. They always have, you know.
Yeah.
And but there was a period before our generation when it was rare, very rare. You had to be a very strong woman to be in the industry. You had to put up with a lot of shit. And now you don't. And it really is because of our generation.
Mm-hmm.
And our generation, that a lot of the things that used to happen in a tattoo shop don't happen anymore, you know?
That's right.
And I don't want to feel bad for being the person that helped make that change, you know? When my shop first opened, the bikers smashed all the windows, destroyed all my stuff.
I was going to ask you about that.
And it was a big fight to move that industry from biker, pirate, sailor to artist, mm-hmm. you know? And I got more business because I could draw in a few minutes any heart with any ribbon, with any word in a minute. I didn't need you to pick one off the wall.
That's right.
You know? And that was the reason I got the work, not because I was nice to people or not because of any other reason. It was just because I could do something that that generation couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And
you could see how the pendulum has swung, like where maybe the old timers didn't receive you well at the beginning, and they were scared of what you were bringing, some of them. And then how we see the next generation, how sometimes the newer generation of tattooers, I've heard the term gatekeepers a lot.
Yeah.
No one's ever said it to my face, but I've heard that term quite a bit.
But people don't insult people to their face. They always do it behind their back.
Yeah.
But it comes up a lot, that term. And it bothers me a little bit, mm-hmm. you know, because, you can go on Amazon and buy a machine and learn to tattoo yourself. But even a short-term apprenticeship helps save you from hurting people and from hurting the industry by creating tattoos that don't heal well and mm-hmm. cause infection.
Yeah.
A lot of infections happen after the tattoo. In fact, I think most. But by tattooing physically properly, the odds are less likely for that to happen, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of thing that can hurt our industry is people tattooing out of their homes, tattooing in unsterile conditions, and tattooing too heavily. At least with an apprenticeship or even a light duty apprenticeship, you still have somebody watching, making sure you're not damaging that person's skin. You know, damage is the biggest thing that'll hurt the industry. You know, infection. And
I think too, like the Dave Nicholson and I did an interview, one of these video interviews over Zoom, and we were talking about he's reserved. He's got some hold back in him. He doesn't just do anything that people Like you've been in tattooing since '89. You don't have your hands tattooed, your neck's not tattooed, but and where now it's just such commonplace. Mm-hmm. But I think that's what us as the new old timers, we just want to try to preserve this industry and see it do well in 7 generations from now, or the next 2 generations. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of preserving this history of what you're doing and what I'm doing, is we're showing people where it came from, so that people understand the tradition of this. Tattooing is such a sacred, special thing that we get to do. And, the commercialization of tattooing has changed how what the attitude about tattoos and that. But I love the fact that you're holding that tradition in such high regard. And I think that's where our passion comes from, is our respect for the industry.
Yeah. And I love it. I love the industry. It was all the greats that I ever met were super nice to me when they didn't even know me. Mm-hmm. The greats, the guys just under the greats wanted nothing to do with me, but the greats didn't have anything to fear. They're like, I'm already great. Hi, how are you? And I love that about the industry. You could approach the greats. You could almost tell who was great by how they treated you back.
Yeah.
And it's a social industry. If you're not good at talking to people or making conversation, your work better be great. Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah. Especially in today's age.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, Bob, thanks for coming on to do this video.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to see you and chat with you.
Yeah.
So thanks for watching. And this is just a little sliver of Bob's personal history. We'll have the whole profile in the book.